I'm a bit of an oddball who has this strange obsession with consciousness. I believe that consciousness is the most important thing in the universe. Whenever we try and detangle this reality we all occupy, consciousness sits as this giant elephant in the room that we don't know what to do with. As a matter of fact, it's been labeled the hard problem of consciousness. And I believe that coming into an understanding of what this thing is the most important thing you can do as a human being. But what in the world is it? Due to the recent increase in popularity in artificial intelligence and neural networks, the quote-unquote in vogue way of viewing consciousness is some sort of emergent property of complex systems. And on the surface level, this would make sense because consciousness appears to be completely made up of information, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that shortly. But this is only how it appears to be, and what I think is actually going on is way more far out than that. When you look at the relationship that consciousness has with information, which I talked about in a video that I'll have on the screen, they appear to be intrinsically linked. You cannot separate the two. So thinking logically, people have come to a conclusion that consciousness is information. It's kind of like, the expression that I'm not saying Bruce Wayne is Batman, but I've never seen them in the same room at the same time. It's something like that. And funnily enough, I do believe that consciousness is information, but it's not the type of information that we think it is. Because the information that constitutes consciousness, or this information that consciousness is supposedly made of, is simultaneously insufficient, terribly insufficient at explaining what consciousness is. And we can do a little thought experiment so I can show you what I mean. Imagine that I stood in front of you with a magic box. It's just a black box that you cannot see into. There is an object in this box, but this object could be anything. If I ask you, what does the object in the box taste like? You obviously wouldn't be able to tell me. Your brain cannot model that. Your consciousness cannot enter this box. And as a result, your conscious perception ends. There is some sort of hard cutoff. It's like trying to imagine what nothingness is like. Because the way that we interact with the world around us is via our brains constructing reality models. And our brains cannot construct nothingness. Nothingness and consciousness, they don't exist simultaneously. And since consciousness depends upon thingness, aka information, in order to exist, we've just pretty much concluded that we essentially are our reality models. Our brains model reality, and this model is us. But I think that this is only half true, because you don't have to dig very deep to see that this reality model is almost sitting on top of something that we cannot describe. If we go back to this thought experiment, if I take this magic box and I open it and I show you that actually there's a banana inside, voila. It instantaneously becomes a part of your reality model. Your brain is able to cover it with language. But this is where something funny happens. Now that you know exactly what's in the box, if I ask you the same question that I did in the beginning, what does the object in the box taste like? Something odd happens. You find that your vocabulary for explaining this is shockingly small. The flavor of a banana is just banana flavored. It's the flavor of a banana. If someone asks you, what does the color red look like? The color red looks like the color red. You don't find it funny that I can tell you the atomic mass of a carbon atom, but I can't tell you what it feels like for something to be sour? I talked about this in my most recent video. These are examples of qualia, and that's just a fancy pants way of saying conscious experience. The best that we can do with it is to associate words with any specific feeling or experience. However, this feeling or experience cannot be expressed in and of itself. So you have this weird situation where the unknown obviously cannot be expressed, but simultaneously, neither can the known. And the reason why I believe it's this way, the reason why I can't tell you what the color blue looks like, you have to see blue for yourself in order to understand it, is because experience itself is some sort of higher dimensional information. That language, written language, verbal communication, is insufficient to examine it. It's kind of like whenever we use language to try and examine the lived experience, this qualia, it would be like a 2D being trying to build some sort of bridge to the third dimension. And I think a good way of conceptualizing what consciousness is, at least for us, it is some sort of higher dimensional factor, presence, entity, being. I'm not sure how to phrase it, but it is some sort of higher dimensional factor that is actually wearing lower dimensional information. Or in other words, we aren't our reality models, but rather we are wearing our reality models. Similar to the way, if you put your hand inside of a sock puppet, except this hand inside of the sock puppet, once you remove the sock from the hand just disappears. It ceases to be there. I guess in a way, it's like a ghost. And as kooky as it all sounds, I'm really not saying anything new. People have been onto this for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Perhaps you've heard it expressed as a spirit inside of a body, mind becoming one with matter. But I think that approach to it is rather limiting as well, and it just comes from our limited perspective. I think that what's actually going on is farther out than that, pivoting off of this idea of mind becoming one with matter, this whole principle of matter. Matter is what makes me believe that this may actually very well be some sort of simulation, but not in the sense that some advanced civilization created a simulation, but there is some sort of primordial factor that is experiencing all possible possibilities. And what I mean by this is, matter is some sort of dimensional illusion, or perhaps a better term is an illusion of scale. I think that it's pretty common knowledge that the things we call matter, these constituents of it, are actually just things within things within things until you get to some sort of point of abstraction where calling something a thing begins to become iffy. And what matter is actually closer to some sort of event. It's tiny things that are moving around and doing their own thing. It is an expression of behavior. You can look at your left tennis shoe. There is so much commotion going on within that shoe, but at our scale, all of that commotion collapses into what we call an object. So matter is more akin to something like a collapsed event. I mean, if you view the universe itself as an event, from the Big Bang to its inevitable heat death, it wouldn't be too far of a stretch to say that everything within it is also an event. And depending on your scale, these events begin to collapse into something else. They collapse into something that is perceived as being greater than the sum of its parts. And what I think this primordial factor is doing is seeing what all of these events are. It is inserting itself into all of these different events, or in other words, it is simulating. It is seeing what it is like. That's what a simulation is, to try out different possibilities. And what this thing is doing, it is simulating all possible possibilities, seeing what everything is like from every conceivable angle. It is seeing what it's like to be an electron. It is seeing what it's like to be an atom, to be an apple, to see what an apple tastes like. It is seeing what it's like to be a Thirdeyetyrone. And yes, this ultimately means that us, our reality, our lives, we are some sort of collapsed event as well. Just like when you perceive an apple, you don't see electrons flying around everywhere and going about their own business. Similarly, some higher form of perception, it didn't see me going to the gym this morning and eating my breakfast. All of that collapses into one meaningful object. And for us, I think it has something to do with this dimension of time, that this concept of scaled perception has something to do with time at our level. Or in other words, time is sort of like this limiting factor. It is the currency of this realm. It's what's ruling over us. If you were to try and scale up to the hypothetical next level of perception, it would have to be something on the outside of time. And I think that this all has something to do with why we keep bumping into concepts such as infinity and singularities. And I talk about these two things on a previous video, which I'll have on the screen to not remediate that. But similar to the way that right now, if you are standing up, you are standing on the second dimension. You are standing on a 2D plane, the floor. Something similar like that happens at some next level of perception. I'm not quite sure, where you are sort of standing on top of time. And as I think about it, I believe that this may very well be why you see in ancient metaphysical systems such as Gnosticism, this emphasis on escaping fate, escaping this deterministic cause and effect type of relationship that time ultimately causes. But before I end this video, I wanted to share a simple infographic of my model of consciousness that I made for my members. It appears that what consciousness is in the business of creating is hyper-specific one-of-one reality models. People say that I sound like Terence McKenna, and the word that he used to use, I believe, was novelty. This appears to be what's occurring. And the way that it is accomplishing this is nothing short of a miracle. It all starts with our ego perception. Or if you prefer, you can use the term reality model. We are all trapped within this construct. You can imagine it that it's some sort of room that you cannot go out of. You cannot see out of it. In order for you to see anything, it has to enter into this room. These are the boundaries of all of our perception. This is why you couldn't tell me what the object inside of the box tasted like before I told you what it was, because it was not a part of your reality model or your ego perception. So you'll notice that within this construct, if nothing is entering into this room, nothing is happening. It's a dark room. You can't see anything. It isn't until things start happening that the room becomes illuminated. You can actually begin to see reality around you. Once light begins to enter into this room, you instantly see that it's some sort of mirrored room. It's some sort of mirrored fun house where when light enters it, it never leaves. It sort of bounces around and it's captured like lightning in a bottle. And this lightning in a bottle is bouncing around in all kinds of chaotic ways and colliding with itself and fracturing out in all kinds of different ways, creating all of these weird, unique resonances that ultimately form up what you call your perspective. This is why we all know what a banana tastes like, but only you know what a banana on a hot summer day at your auntie's house in 1998, only you know what that tastes like. Your life is just a series of hyper-specific qualia. It's a unique reality model, which is what everything is. Everything is unique. The petals on a flower that are directly next to each other are ridiculously unique, even though to us it appears to be the same thing. And there are reasons why this room is mirrored, and this is ultimately a metaphor. This model that I created, it relies heavily on metaphor, which perhaps I'll explain in another video, or if you're interested, you can go and become a member. It's available on one of my community posts or on my locals page, where I can probably go into greater detail. But you can think of it as a metaphor for our brain. Everyone has a unique one-of-one brain. Everything that you experience, this light bouncing around the room, or the information that you take in from reality, it literally molds and shapes your brain in a way that is completely unique to you. Our brain is like this VR headset that is generating this unique reality model. We aren't this reality model, but we are some sort of higher dimensional entity that has it on. And when I use this term entity, I don't really mean, like an alien. This all, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, it all has something to do with consciousness. This term consciousness that I keep using. Perhaps it's something more akin to a field. And rather than consciousness being an emergent property of complex systems, it may actually be the reverse, that as systems become more complex, they sort of tap into a higher gradient of consciousness. And currently, the human being sits as the most conscious and simultaneously the most complex organism on the planet, as far as we know, within the universe. I know that most of us just pick our noses and watch fail army videos or however we entertain ourselves, but the human brain is widely considered to be the most complicated structure in the universe. It's really tricky and trippy to explain, and quite frankly, at this moment, my head hurts trying to detangle all of this, so I'm going to end it here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, let me know what you think in the comments. I know that this one was a bit of a doozy, so let me know your thoughts. And until next time, y'all have a blessed day.